Hey, what is up everybody, Blades for here, and today for you guys another video, Persona 5X. Inside today's video guys, we're going to be doing the global tier list here, and we're going to try and start this every month. Just like my TWKR and CN tier list, I make sure I try to do them at least once a month, which covers at least that patch as well as the patch prior, to really kind of settle where these characters are going to be. Now, as a little bit of a disclaimer for a lot of you guys, this is going to be more focused in a way of just usability, guild boss, SOS, as well in just general type usability in all different teams. I am taking teams in account as usual for TW and KR as well, so there are going to be some differences. Some things that I want to of course point out for this here, which is the reason I have Pride 1 up on the side, is Pride 1's tier list is more or less used for generality where they're talking about the character specific. I'm talking about character specific with the aspects as well of team comps. So a good at least example of this is, for example, we have Cherish. Cherish just by himself, looking at the character, is absolutely amazing. Though Cherish as usability throughout CN has not been used. So this character quite literally cannot be at a higher tier, seeing there has not been any content, nor has been a real usability point for this character in general. So he would usually rank lower, but still have a decent high rank, but based on his actual usability by himself. So we're gonna go ahead and try and do this as well, and I'm gonna make sure I have all the characters up so we can actually read what they end up doing, because some of the wording is a little bit weird that I've noticed on global. So I want to make sure that we have everything properly worded here. So if you guys are going to enjoy this video, be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. This one's going to be a little bit longer because I am going to be explaining a lot of the characters piece by piece, and as we slowly get through at least the tier list, and as global does continue going on, it'll be a little bit quicker, seeing we're just going to move characters around, explain the newest characters added, and moving characters just based on the meta and based on general use and things of that sort. So without further ado, let's get straight into the action. So starting with the S tier action here, we're going to start from the top down, and I feel like a lot of you guys, actually, you know what? Nah, we'll save the top for last. Let's start with the bottom down here, and that is going to be our man Sepia. Now, unfortunately, Sepia, although he has all the drip in the world, this is one of the few characters that just is not too good currently. And that's mainly because DOT at the beginning of the game is not the best unless you're just really doing fire-based things. It's not really the best. DOT itself is going to be based on that HP amount that they do have, and although it can be nice, Sepia himself doesn't really have a team that can be very useful. He himself is pretty alright. He does at least some of the job that he does need to do, but this character is quite literally not used in any place whatsoever. And when it comes down to SOS, when it comes down to guild boss, neither one he is usable in, and even for just general use, this character is lacking quite a lot. Majority of this reason is because of how his stacks does work with his DOT. It takes a while to of course get those stacks on up, and when you do have them up, you really don't get as much for at least your troubles. When you go ahead and just decide some other characters that can really be used in this aspect, unfortunately he's one of the few that just aren't really the ones to come to mind, and it's just because of the low amount of damage he can really do. But that's the only reason why I have him at least the lower tier of D, and he is only going to be the only one inside of D tier, which does suck to say, but unfortunately this is how it's going to be. And the next tier that we're going to end up going over is the C tier. These are going to be characters that can very be used, but are definitely used even less than normal. There's only 3 characters inside of this slot, one of them being of course Closer. The main reason for this is because we don't really have content currently that is going to be electric supported. Closer herself is not really a bad unit. It's one of the first characters that she ends up coming out here, but the issue with her is she kind of has an identity crisis when it comes down to her role. Her role as an AoE DPS is not really what she's meant for. She kind of plays a little bit in divvy between as a little bit of a buffer, while also trying to divvy between as a damager. Although this may sound pretty darn good, it really doesn't help her out too much. One of the actual aspects of this is going to really just come down to her thief tactics being the highlight, in which she does increase her electric damage taken to the enemy. Kind of like a debuff, and it does help out her overall damage, but it's still kind of lackluster. But with this in mind here, she does at the same time allow herself to deal a little bit more damage based on what she does have. The only issue is, as this character does go on, you really don't utilize her too much. You have to try and buff yourself with at least the skill 2 being Blitz Mine, and this is kind of helpful, but it still takes away from her DPS type aspect, because now you're trying to worry about buffing yourself while also trying to worry about dealing damage. These two things don't really go hand in hand for closer, and unfortunately it's kind of her Achilles heel for not being able to be used. One of the few reasons why I feel like her, even on different teams, she doesn't really have a good placement currently. Once Bowie does come out, she will have a little bit of a spot there, so who knows, we may see her move up for that brief patch, but she definitely will most likely stay down here as in this aspect, seeing that she just is not worth to really build. So you're still gonna have at least a place for this, seeing there is Velvet Trials, but SOS, General Play, and Guild Boss's character is just not useful for that. Then we have our next character. This character is going to be Yuki. Now Yuki is a defender, a blessed defender at this, who is mainly specialized in that single target defensive here. This is more or less going to come into play when of course we get Yusuke into the game, and that's where the ice team, or at least the defensive based teams, are going to start to flourish a little bit. The only issue is right now we don't really need the defensive capabilities of Yuki, and that's mainly just because it's only helping out one person. Not to mention with their blessed abilities here, it's not really going to help you out too much on the healing side either, so it really doesn't help you. All in all, she does have of course an AoE buff as well, or an AoE shield, which is pretty dang nice to do, especially if you do set it up correctly, though it's still too lackluster. It takes a couple turns to actually go ahead and set up, and with this in mind, it doesn't make her really worth using. Even if I wanted to go ahead and say that she has things such as like Oath that increases her damage, but it just wouldn't really help her out too much. Her entire passive, at least lore itself, or the passive itself, is pretty darn decent, but with this character actually thinking about in the teams that we can actually use her for, there's other characters that kind of do what she does but a little bit better. If we wanted some healing, we would just go ahead and go to Mona, or at least our man Lefel. Though if we wanted some defending, we'd rather just go ahead and go for Shun, seeing that he himself gives you shields, gives you debuffs, and also is allowed to of course restore your HP. So I mean, at the end of the day, you really don't need it. And by the shields for our man Shun, I meant by at least the healing aspect for his HP. But at the end of the day, you really would not need her. She doesn't really do too much that will help you out, and although she does make it so the target decreases, there at least the damage taken. So I mean, like at that point, yeah, you get some damage taken decrease from the shield that she offers up. It still is only for one person, so at the end of the day, it's just not worth it. All right, so coming down to the last character that's going to be in this section, that is going to be Ice Mont. Now Ice Mont as a single target DPS is quite lackluster. She can of course get the job done depending on the content that you're doing. Most likely a lot of you guys are going to be using her for Velvet Trials because of course we need an ice DPS, so this is probably the one that we're going to end up going with. You're going to probably use her quite a lot for at least Velvet Trials, but that's pretty much where her usability ends. Once we do get more ice characters off Yusuke, there's going to be different things that this character just won't be usable for. Even without just utilizing Yusuke, she doesn't have a good usability. Now I know of course if my man the Jocks watched this video, he'd probably beat me upside my head for saying this, but the character just doesn't have enough. It takes a little bit of a long time for her to stack her ice crystals as well, which can be very much so a problem when it comes down to dealing all that nice damage that is really locked behind this. Even going down with her 5-star weapon, it really doesn't make too much of a difference for her. Her 5-star weapon, although it does increase the amount of ice stacks that she's able to deal, which does increase her crit damage and all of her actual percentages, it still does not seem like it offers too much to go with this character. Hence the reasoning that she's actually going to be ranked so low. There's other single targets much like Fleuret and Yuki that are pretty much more useful. They also have better teams at this point in time, and trying to pair up Leon with at least Mont is not going to be really too helpful. He's already a glass cannon at heart, so we take away any bit of her HP, even if it's just for the crit rate or the crit damage that he does offer, it's not going to be a pretty sight to say the least. She's not going to do all too well, so I figured that putting her at least in the C tier is probably where she best set. Now we're going to go ahead and move up to the B tier. There's going to be 4 characters inside of this tier here, and although this is the most controversial tier for me, I feel like a lot of you guys unfortunately are going to end up agreeing with this. This tier is mainly going to be based that they are usable in different aspects as substitute characters that can be utilized in different teams, whether it's for guild boss, SOS, or just general play. There's nothing bad about these characters whatsoever, and in fact some of them in the future are actually going to move up the tier instead of being moved where they are now. So one of these characters that we're firstly going to start off is our man Key. Now Key is a pretty decent character. He's a debuffer at heart here, but the only usability area that's good for him is going to be on a fire team. As a debuffer, he can be very well used on different teams, seeing that he can be a substitute for different other characters, though I would say the character himself kind of lacks in that aspect. He himself quite literally is just bound to a fire team, and if there is no real things that he's able to help out with at least the burns and the sacred flames that he has, he's just never going to be useful. Unfortunately, this character, although he's really good with his burn stacks, he is held back heavily. He doesn't have enough type of debuff aspects to make him more of a prospect to being picked, and that is where he kind of lies. The only saving grace that's happening for this character is because fire team is so prominent currently, and it's going to stay prominent for a very long time, so it keeps him kind of in that meta area, or at least in that area of ability. The other part is because since we do utilize this character in the current guild boss, he is allowed to be up here. So I feel like if the guild boss was not actually acquainted here, he would definitely be a little bit lower than what he's ranked currently. Now the character is going to go down with time, which does kind of suck because I do really love this guy, but unfortunately it is just how the cookie crumbles. He's really a unit, but I feel like at the end of the day he's going to end up just going down, and even with dupes he will only be useful for some little amount of time. So I think at least B tier is where he's going to at least reside currently. And the next character that we're going to talk about, and this one is probably going to get me some heat here, is going to be our man Mona. Now I know some people are going to hate me for this one, but just hear me out on how this is going to go. Morgana himself is a 5-star. Yes, he is a good 5-star, and he is a standard 5-star, so he is at least available to be gotten quite often. The only issue is the other 5-stars that are also standards are all having way more usability than this character himself. The only thing that Mona himself ends up bringing is the winded status, which can proc every now and again, and which does a little bit of a defense decrease, and the other part is healing. If you really wanted to throw him a bone, you could say you are going to be needing that revive as well, but really shouldn't be dying all too often. And if you are, of course, you will have at least a sustainer, much like LaFell, who can do also attack buffs, and much like our man Soy, who can just keep your whole team just at a freaking amazing health. Whether it comes down to restoring your health, just tanking hits, seeing he has a taunt, pretty much Morgana only just has overcap on health. He doesn't really do much else than that. All you have that's really going for him is, hey, I have crit heals, that's pretty awesome. I have a lot of HP, that's pretty it. And that's where this character kind of resides. Unfortunately, with at least the usability of this character, you're not going to use him too much. He can be as well a substitute character, hence his reason being in the B tier. As for different characters that could be very more useful than this, is definitely going to be Bell and Soy, so it kind of puts him at the back burner. Now this doesn't mean by anything here. Something I have to say right now with this tier list is these characters are still usable. You don't have to say like if they're at the lower tier that you just can't use the character. You still can very well use the character, just compared to other units they are going to be a lot lower, and Morgana fits in this type of aspect. All he has going for him, as I did say before, is kind of a knockdown from the crit, being off Gentle Fist or Lucky Punch itself. You have, of course, Missile Whirlwind, which is his first one, just doing a winded, which, if I'm being honest, is 50-50 on proccing. And then, of course, you have the heal, which doesn't always crit heal, can sometimes be a little bit lackluster, but does get the job done when you need it to. That's about it. The revive really isn't too much of a need, and it is based only on his highlight. If you're letting a match go for that long to a point that you lose a character, have to revive them, and then you need to get it again, that means there's something wrong with the team comp itself, which is where Morgana ends up losing a lot of his light. So unfortunately, we had to put the man at B tier, and I think that's where he's probably going to reside even as time does go by. Now, our next character in B tier is unfortunately going to be Moko. Now, a lot of you guys know how I feel about Moko being up here, but the one thing I can say is early game, she does have some use. In the future, she won't have any use compared to the other characters, so she will be way lower where she pretty much resides. But I will say currently, Moko is actually pretty decent for a B tier character. This character does a couple buffs that quite literally is pretty helpful with the current way of how we're doing SOS or even doing guild boss, and it's pretty dang nice to have. With at least her buff being cheering you on, it does help you out with the attack that you do need here, which is very nice to also have here. But the main thing that she's getting out of this is just target damage up while also getting the attack up. Think of it as kind of a bootleg Leon, but not instead of actually paying attention to the crit damage, we're only paying attention to just increasing damage taken as well as the attack percentage up. So it's more of just an overall attack buffer. She has at least her aspects with this, and it's pretty decent to have for now, but seeing that she's not able to use the mental images or the mental stacks that she has when inflicting sleep or any of those type of moves, it's gonna be her downfall in the future. She can only increase that said extra damage if she implies at least a sleep or a mental element on the opponent, so this will only work against regular old mobs. As for any other mobs that's mainly a just boss mob, it won't work on them, so at that part she just doesn't go any higher on the tier list. Still, she's not bad at all. She has a few things inside of her kit that are make her kind of decent. That's mainly going to be the attack stacks as well as just the damage increase stacks. Being that she's actually used inside of SOS and Guild Boss, it kind of boosted her up on this tier list, and I feel like for at least B tier, this is definitely where she's going to end up residing. But you guys let me know down below in the comment section. Now we have our last character here, and this is going to be our man Fleuret. Now he is an absolute amazing unit in the future, and he's still a really good unit to use today. In fact, on the Pride 1 tier list, if you guys want to go ahead and take this as an account, he is ranked fairly highly. He's really good, but the issue is that's at A6. Lower A's is where he kind of dives off here, and that's why I want to kind of take into account for a lot of people who are at least in the general use currently. Right now, he's pretty decent, though there are characters for SOS and Guild Boss that he's just substituting for. And that main character is going to be Ryuji. As much as we, of course, have to say that Ryuji does set up a little bit longer, our man Seiji here, it takes a little while too. Himself, he has to set up his skill 1 first before he can start spamming skill 3. At that amount of time, the damage that he can get off is actually a little bit under our man Ryuji, and I feel like this is where he's gonna have to stay residing for now at least. Until of course more updates come out, this man Fleuret is gonna stay in at least the B tier area, or the B tier area here, and I feel like it's not too crazy to say this. He does deal some crazy decent damage, but once again, it's a single targeter, so they can only go too far. Can't really place him too high above Ryuji because currently Ryuji is utilized way more than him and does deal a little bit more damage than him. So right now we can only just sit here and just wait until the other updates do come out, which will showcase Fleuret being way more than a menace when he has more supporters. But currently, this is where he's gonna have to be. Unfortunate though. Now that we're going ahead and moving on to the A tier, hopefully you guys have been enjoying the video. If you did, please do smash that like button, hit the subscribe button. We're going to continue on from here. Now the A tier, these are going to be people who have been used a lot more. They're pretty more often inside of at least the meta, and they're all pretty often inside of just general use. These characters, not without a doubt, are going to have some characters that are above them, of course, in the S tier, and it's mainly going to be due to classification and just usability throughout the game. So we're going to go ahead and get started with our first character. First unit here that we're going to talk about is Lefel. Now Lefel himself is absolutely amazing. He's one of the few characters that I feel like a lot of you guys are going to throw rocks at me for because we have Morgana still here. But once again, hear me out on this one. The reason why Lefel is here is because not only does he go on at least the fire team, but he himself can put fire stacks on the enemy. So he's actually very useful to just float around in any team. As long as you need a little bit of DOT, you need a little bit of just that nice old healing, or either if you just want some attack buffs, this character can do all three. In fact, he's very useful for this, and way more useful than I remember him being at the beginning of the game for TW and KR. This character without a doubt does make his presence very well known, and seeing that he is on the first banner as side characters for 4 stars, he also is very obtainable. With this in mind, I feel like a lot of you guys are definitely going to love using this character, and he has a lot more usability than most people would think with Morgana. Though at the same time, I know if I'm saying that, my Morgana stands out there are gonna pretty much want to pelt me with snowballs, so please do refrain from doing that. But I will say, the man Lefel makes it very known that he deserves a spot, so I think he stays in the A tier bracket. Now we go ahead and move on to our next character, which may also be a little controversial, but is gonna be Riddle. I feel like Riddle is also one of these few characters that is getting a bad light, and I feel like that's mainly because, of course, the CN side of things. As you can see on CN, we rarely ever use this character, and even for at least bossing wise, she's just not talked about. I feel like a lot of you guys have gotten that ingrained in your head, and with that in mind, you just immediately throw Riddle out the window. Granted, Riddle does take a while to set up. She's one of the few characters that you do need to have her stacks in order to make sure you're getting the mess out of her actual whole kit. Though the thing I will have to say is she is fairly useful for both SOS, guild boss, and just general play. If you wanted some buffs, she definitely had it to her disposal. She can very well give you shields, give you like actual healing, while also giving you that damage that you're looking for. Everything is pretty dang nice, seeing that her third skill can help you out with the attack percentage and the damage dealt, so it won't really matter what you do. This character is going to be really broken. I feel like at the beginning of the game, if you guys do have her, she is going to be very useful, in which it kind of justifies her placement on this tier list. Though of course some of you guys probably still doubt me, so I will have to say this character has several different uses, and it's all going to stem from her third skill. Based on those stacks, she can give you damage dealt, attack, and even crit damage if you really go that far, but really, you're just gonna have to figure out the character itself. It depends on the situation in hand, and with the current use of just SOS and guild boss, she definitely makes it known that she belongs in this area. I couldn't place her any higher than this though, because there is a buffer that really does what she does, but 3 times better, and I'm pretty sure you guys know exactly who that is. So we won't go any further from that. Now our next character that is going to be in the A tier area, this is going to be our girl Okyann. Now Okyann is absolutely amazing, and the only reason why she is not an S tier character is because Joker exists. Now how I have this actually function out here is I also tried to do by class ability here. Seeing that both Okyann and Joker are both AoE DPSs, I had to at least put Okyann a little bit lower. And it's not because she's worse than Joker. In fact, I believe that in some aspects she's way better than Joker. Seeing that majority of the content does resist curse, I would like to say that she is somewhat better than Joker, but the only reason why she's a little bit down is just because at this point in time, our premium unit is Joker. He is dealing a lot more damage, he has extra turns, and unlike Okyann, she doesn't have any of that extra deal here. So she kind of gets brought down a little bit. But the good part about Okyann, and why I feel like she really at least deserves to be this high here, is because one, she does some really good AoE damage. Along with this, of course, fire DPS is absolutely insane and allows you to clear a lot more things under leveled than most people do think. With the fire stacks that you can go ahead and apply on people, including the actual stacks that she gives for her third skill, she really makes it known that she can deal some crazy damage markers as long as she's set up correctly. The more, of course, these stacks that she has, she'll eventually get an enhanced move that will deal even more damage than many people do think. Then of course, if you want to cheap out a boss or anything of that nature, you can very well use her skill 2, which has a 75% chance to inflict a burn, and which is something I've used quite often. She's a very valuable character that has a lot of different aspects that can be utilized, though of course you do have to think there are other characters that do just what she does, cough our man Joker, but just slightly does it a little bit better, and it's only just because the extra turns that he ends up having. This character right now, without a doubt, is going to go up in the future, but I do feel like right now deserves where she ends up being. And it's kind of unfortunate to say it this way, but this is probably the best way that we can do it, unless you have just dupes on this character immensely. All right, we're going to go ahead and get to our last 2 characters here, and this is going to start off with Okyann. Now Okyann is a really good Navi for the time being here, and that's only because there's only 2 in the game. Seeing that there's only 2 in the game, I had to go with the one that is used least rather than the one that's used the most here. And that's mainly because Okyann herself is very helpful, but at the same time, she is a offensive Navi. As good as that may be, a lot of people are trying to just survive, and that's more or less going to come with Puppet. So seeing that, of course, this is the only other Navi that's inside the game, I feel like Okyann definitely deserves to be here. Although she does help you out with the attack beats and everything of this nature, it's still one of the few things I feel like a lot of characters really don't need with her. In fact, you can do more than enough damage if you have supporters in your team and or just debuffers in your team as well. So Okyann's use really isn't needed here. So I can't put her too low because at the end of the day, we only have 2 actual Navis. So if I put her way too low, it would just make absolutely no sense because you're bound to having them in your team. So I had to put her at least in the A tier. I think this is where she's going to reside, at least until Rico comes out, and then we'll slowly end up moving her down. All right, now our next character that we're going to go ahead and talk about, this one is going to be Skull. Now Skull, as I did say before, deserves to be in the A tier. I had to ask a few people around as well to make sure I had my all ducks in a row here. And the only other person who could possibly take his spot is at least Seiji. Though I feel like Seiji himself just couldn't take it because the main person for DPS for SOS or Guild Boss, or some of those bosses, are going to be Ryuji. Although he does take up a little bit more time, it's definitely still granted to want Ryuji. For example, Koryu was the last Guild Boss there, and Ryuji was the main DPS for that. Seiji could very well be used for it, but you really still wanted to utilize Ryuji. There's no one that can really substitute him, or at least Ryuji doesn't really substitute other people, but he has people who tries to substitute him. So in that aspect, I had to put Ryuji a little bit higher. This character comes in with a lot of damage here and really only gets better in the future once we do get Ange out here as well. I'm pretty sure it's Ange instead of Ange, so we're gonna call it Ange in the future as well. I would like to say this man only really comes in handy with at least his passive, allowing him to of course deal more damage based on his HP, but at the same time it just also comes down to this third skill. God Hand Burst does way too much dang damage, and even if I wanted to not give this man his flowers, he will absolutely contradict everything I say, and that's just because he does a lot of damage. He just needs to have that support really allowing him to do so. With characters like Leon or even characters like Puppet, he will be able to do so, so I feel like a lot of you guys really need to give a little bit more emphasis to our man Ryuji. There were a couple people arguing about his use, and I do feel like a lot of you guys arguing about the use are thinking too much on at least the CN side. Currently for Global, he's not bad at all. He's really good actually, and he will only get better once Ange does come out, so truly do keep that in mind. But with that out of the way here, we're going to go ahead and move on to our S tier section, and these are just going to be characters that are undeniably used the most, used for SOS, used for Guild Boss, and just have an overall use in general for any team and every team in the game on Global. So these last few characters are going to be our man Joker, and I really don't think I have to explain this. He's just the best DPS when it comes down to AoE DPS currently, and it's probably going to stay like this for a few patches. In fact, the last Guild Boss that we did ended up dealing way more than enough damage, so I mean, this character is just going to be staying. The Guild Boss that we have this week is also Dominion, so he's still going to be staying from there. Puppet is used so often that at this point in time, I don't think it's just going to be at least deniable at this point. You're going to need her for sustainability. She also increases your damage dealt, so I feel like Puppet herself deserves to be in the S tier spot. Then we have Soy. As I did say earlier, the man heals you, he inflicts different taunts. He's able to defense shred with his gun. He's able to of course defense shred with his skill 2 and inflict freeze, allowing the enemy to deal even less attack. With all this bound into at least a defender, he definitely keeps his spot in the S tier ranking. Then we have Rin, who is a debuffer and the best debuffer pretty much in the game currently. She's going to be like this for quite some time, but really just sticks with the curse related teams. And with this in mind, I feel like a lot of you guys are going to want to use her. She also has the ability to do a forget status on the enemy, so at the same time you're getting not only that damage increase on curse or just damage dealt increase in general, but you're also getting some mental element increases there, which allow you to do some crazy things with at least her whole kit. And then lastly for the character here, and I know all of you guys know who exactly I'm about to click on, that is the man Leon. Crit damage buffer through and through, attack buffer through and through. This character makes it very well known that he deserves to be in the S tier category. Plus with his usability inside of Guild Boss SOS and even general use, it's pretty obvious that this character really needs to be here. And I don't think anyone's really just gonna deny that part. So with that out of the way, this is the tier list for the global side of things. Let me know if you guys agree with it or not disagree, or at least disagree with it as well, and put down your comments in the comment section down below. I'd be interested in listening to it, though I probably will have a refuted statement with a lot of them, so it's not really going to help you out on that aspect, but I will say I will listen to it anyways. So truly do go ahead and try to comment down below, but till next time everybody, peace out.